This is Smooth 98.1. Love music, love life. It's a Tuesday morning. Welcome along to the Smooth Breakfast. Ayokunmi here, taking you into your Tuesday morning. Time to get into the world of the papers on Freshly Pressed. It has been a bit of a hiatus. Apologies for that. I've been getting myself back together. One thing I will say is that good health is something you can never, ever overestimate. So when you have your health, please do take care of yourselves and try to make sure that you are in optimum working condition. That is something that I will preach today. I've been having to deal with all sorts of things, cold, cough, kata, and all that. Still not out of the woods 100%, but I just have to be here with you after a while away. While I was away, it was a case of me just thinking, I need to get back into the studio, get on the show, and of course, talk about what's going on in the papers and everything. Hey, here we are on a Tuesday. So welcome along to the ride with us. By us, I'm not doing this alone by no stretch of the imagination. Joining me this morning to take a look at the stories, give analysis and perspective, Chibuzor and Mr. C are with me. Good morning to you, Chibuzor. Great to have you on.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning. Oh, good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Mr. C. Good morning, Ayo. Good to be here.
Good morning, Ayo. Welcome back. Good morning, Chibuzor. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, good morning to you too, Mr. C. Great to have you in on a Tuesday. Not the usual, but hey, anything I can get you on, I will not pass up the opportunity. Lagos, Nigeria, wherever you're listening to us right now, you can join us on the conversation by sharing your thoughts on WhatsApp on 0809 440 981. 0809 440 981. That is the WhatsApp number. Also join us on YouTube. We're streaming live at Smooth 91 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. You can drop your comments right there. I'll definitely be taking them along with the comments on WhatsApp as we get along. Okay, Mr. C, let's get into the groove this morning. Let's start in the Vanguard newspaper and talk about the big one that dropped yesterday, bolt out of the blue, if I can say so, coming out of Lagos State. Now, members of the Lagos State House of Assembly have impeached the Speaker Mudashiru Obasa over allegations of abuse of office and gross misconduct. Now, the lawmakers subsequently elected Mojisola Miranda, representative of Opapa, as the new speaker. Also, the members removed the clerk, Olalekan Onofeko. Now, he was said to have single-handedly brought to the assembly by Obasa. Now, both were behind the ban on journalists covering activities in the assembly and so on and so forth. Now, looking at this particular incident, Mr. C, it reminds me of when General Yakubu Gowon was overthrown. He was in Kampala, Uganda, on a summit, OAU summit, if I remember correctly. And Obasa was in Atlanta in the US, and everybody came together and said, he's not home. Let's do this and get him out of the office. So we are here right now, Mr. C. What does this mean? What are the implications?
Okay, thank you, Ayo. So let's even go to events of yesterday. So yesterday, the substantive speaker was not in the chamber plenary, and the session was presided over by the deputy speaker. A motion was moved by one of the members of the House that the speaker be impeached, and pronto he was impeached. Now, by the provisions of the Constitution, two-thirds of members would have had to sign up to that. It is not yet clear how many members were present or in attendance at yesterday's session and how many voted in support of the motion to impeach the speaker. Now, the deputy speaker has been sworn in.
Right.
What are the options to the impeached speaker? Assuming he intends to challenge this, he will have to go to court. And he would have to present evidence before the court suggesting or strongly indicating that two-thirds of the members did not impeach him and that the impeachment process was not carried out in line with the extant rules and regulations of the Assembly. But beyond all of this, there is a backdrop. So we need to go back the last 18 months. I also said it was a bolt out of the blue. It was only a bolt out of the blue as to what happened, not if it happened. So it was literally a case of a walking corpse. Now, Mr. Obasa had made certain incendiary statements in the past. One was when it was rumored or suggested that the current first son of the president, should run for office in 2027. And Mr. Obasa was reported to have said there's no previous governor or serving governor of Lagos State is better than him. Now, that statement was had on all levels. One, it's clear even to the point he cannot be put in the same class with Alhaji Lateef Jacob. That's clear. Even other distinguished governors like BRF, like Ambode, he's not in that class. But more importantly, he did equal himself to current president, who incidentally was also a governor of the state. So it was only a matter of time. Another instance was when it was time to present the budget for 2025. It's reported that he allegedly kept governor of Lagos State for 4 hours, along with other dignitaries. And then when he eventually made it to the chambers, there were no apologies. So he's in office for 10 years as Speaker. There have been numerous allegations against him. If you ask me, he's not going to challenge this because there's so much dirt against him. It's not in his interest to challenge his impeachment. The big question is, will he return to the tree to finish out his term? Time will tell. But this is like a done dusted deal, and it is also even to the blood that this would not have been done if Mr. President did not give his approval. Because Lagos is still his state politically. And nobody takes a decision of this magnitude without his buy-in, without his currents.
Okay, thank you for sharing those thoughts, Mr. C. What I actually do want to know is, I mean, looking at what has happened with Mudashiru Obasa here, I mean, what does this spell for anyone who, should I say, goes against the grain or goes against the supposed structure in quotes of what's going on in Lagos? And because it seems like everything needs to go a particular way. So are we saying that someone else probably comes up and maybe doesn't do anything, excuse me, wrong, or is perceived as someone who has done anything or gross misconduct or whatever, someone who goes against the grain? Does this mean that anyone who doesn't go along with the playbook is at risk of being taken out politically, I mean?
So the truth of the matter is, once you are against the ruling party in any location, you run the risk of being moved from office. But Oba's case was unique and peculiar in the sense that he had accumulated a lot of things, stepped on a lot of toes over time, and it's not the public in anyways. That's why there have been no protests, no complaints from a large section of the public. Now, contrast that with when BRF fell out Tinubu in his first term of office, and it was time for re-election. They couldn't really do anything to him because the people loved him, so they kept him in office. So the truth of the matter is, insofar as you're doing the work that has been given to you by law and you're doing it properly, you're ensuring that you're catering to the interests of the larger portion of the public. Political interests will be limited in affecting your career. But again, you have to be seeming above board. So, to answer your question in one sense, do your work, be above board, and you'll be immune to a certain extent from political moves such as that we've witnessed yesterday.
I'd just like to chip in. So obviously Lagos is controlled by the ruling party, and obviously has been in control by the ruling party in one guise or the other since 99, basically. And so Obasa came in through the same system that, because the truth is that if you ask, one of the things that came out when he obviously it became a bit obvious that he was eyeing the gubernatorial position, or appeared to that he was eyeing the gubernatorial position, was that people started questioning what were basically his qualifications. Was he the kind of person they wanted to see as governor? And they weighed him side by side. So he didn't stand out to be someone who would have been there if, there was a choice to be made. He's obviously one of those people that have a very strong base in his area, in his constituency, and that is why he's kept. And when we say strong base, it's also there's a mix of popularity and being able to control, have physical control of the area, of the location, having the boys behind you, which was what obviously some of his supporters tried to do when they heard that the news, when they tried to storm the house. And like Mr. C alluded to, obviously, we had the police and security forces well positioned at the near the State House of Assembly to prevent any actions by those boys, that they were quickly clamped into vehicles. So I think yes, while Ayo raises a very a good question about if you go against the grain, or if you go against the ruling party, what becomes of the forces that hold the ruling party together. The thing is, unfortunately, politics is basically about numbers, and underlining those numbers, they are control. So it doesn't, it's almost like the 80-20 Pareto principle. It doesn't have to be the 80 people that control 80% that control the party. It might just be 20%, even a 1% that controls what happens within those structures. If you go against them internally, you need to be well prepared. I don't think Obasa was as prepared as he thought he was. He felt that he would push his way through it. So let's see how he responds to it. Really, I'll be interested in seeing how he responds to it at the end of the day. But I don't see much coming out of this. He's probably just going to take his time, sneak back into the house when the noise is, when the noise has reduced, and just try and buy his time and see what his next moves are.
We shall see. Politics is a game of numbers. Let's head into the vanguard and talk about some more numbers here. Senator Adams Oshiomhole of APC Edo North on Monday, that's yesterday, queried the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board JAM over its spending in 2024. Now, speaking during the agency's 2025 budget defense session before the National Assembly Joint Committee on Finance, Oshiomhole asked JAM Registrar Professor Ishak Oloyede to justify 850 million naira spent on security, on cleaning, and fumigation in the last year. I'm going to leave it at that, Chibuzor. I mean, this is not the first time we hear some of these very funny things being attributed to different agencies, departments, and so on and so forth. Now, 850 million spent on security, on cleaning, and fumigation. What size of rats do they have, in the JAM offices to warrant this sort of spending?
So this is that thing being thrown by someone who's not my favorite person or favorite. He was never he's not my favorite person, even as governor, now as senator, but
even as president?
But at times you see even
those are the days of.
he's probably one of the reasons why I was never a fan of labor unions and student unions. I think a lot of people ride on the coattails of those kind of associations to the top, and when they get there, they use it's almost a use and disuse approach. When it favors them, they use it. When it doesn't, they throw out the cloaks. And Mr. Adams, or Comrade Adams, like he likes to call himself, is a good example of that. So, but hey, let's not throw away the message with the messenger in this instance. So it's a good question to ask. What I'll be interested in is how many offices does JAM have, for instance, that would warrant this kind of bill for fumigation and cleaning. And this is not saying in a way that the challenge I have with these things is that you're put forth rating, security, cleaning, and fumigation, right? Let's remove all the guises of all the snoozes of corruption, or how the appearances of corruption in this thing. These are functions that are carried out by low earning or low income earners. And if, for instance, in reality, these amounts are paid to the guys who provided the services, I would not be too worried. But at 850 million, I would, like I said, I would really like to know how many offices JAM have or has that would warrant such a bill. It's quite interesting because the professor has been one of those people who have been lauded over the years about how much he's brought back into the government coffers, how he's been very, how he's one of, because I remember when he was initially appointed, he was one of those guys that went back and said, I'm going to bring back this to the coffers of the government. This is how much I did not spend. I'm returning this. I generated X amount. And I do remember at one of the points, one of the biggest questions was, what was the role or responsibility of JAM? Was JAM a revenue? Was JAM supposed to be a revenue earning agency, or were they supposed to provide a social service? Because it did appear that the professor, like many of the other people who have been brought into particular positions in in government power have moved their functions from providing social services to being revenue generating agencies.
Right.
And that's the question that still needs to be answered. So, but is it, about this bill? What I would ask the professor to do is get his staff together, get his accountants together, and get the evidence to back up these arguments and clear his reputation in the eyes of the public. I do think that when it comes to some of these expenses, there's always the thing about the way a lot of the public agencies work, or a lot of agencies work in the public space, is you don't have the structure. So if you have things like, have regular audits, you have professional structures that run within these organizations, you have less of this kind of questions being thrown and asked. But unfortunately, everything is driven by the breath, the air, and the wind of politics. And, everybody does whatever they want to do and hope they don't get caught at the end of the day, or hope they don't get questioned. I'm not saying he's getting caught, but don't get questioned. So let the professor come and defend himself. But hey, 850 million, yes, to all of us sounds like a very big bill. So I would really like to know how many buildings, how like the rats were. And if you can sell the rats for rat before bushmeat.
Okay, let me quickly jump in on this, right?
Yeah.
I think it's extremely easy journalism to be able to break down that 50 along areas mentioned. So I
Exactly.
heard cleaning and security, I heard mitigation. What portion of the 850 was allocated to security? What portion was allocated to fumigation? What portion was allocated to cleaning? Two, how many, Chibuzor asked a wonderful question. How many officers jam-packed in the country? That's even one per state and one in the FCT. So we're looking at 37 locations, right? Now, quickly divide 850 by 37. You'll probably get something around 25 million. Then further divide 25 million by 12 months. So what is seemingly looking outrageous when further broken down may not necessarily be outrageous, given the cost of goods and services today, especially the cost of providing security. So the senator himself wasn't entirely hardworking. He should have broken it down. The journalists should have further broken it down. Now we've gotten a sensational headline with a lot of work having not yet been done. But hey, this is Nigeria.
So, Mr. C, I said I didn't want to talk too much about one of my favorite people, because it does appear that after the senator has gotten rid of the distractions of his home state and finally installing his preferred candidate as governor and also getting his son into the cabinet, he's now focusing on issues of the national concern as a senator. And obviously, the last two reports have come with sensational reports. I think the last one was on power, where he threw a lot of things and hoped that they would stick. Now he's gone to this. Like I said, for me, it's an easy thing. If you can come out with your papers and, like you said, there's a lot of things to be gleaned out of it. How many offices do you have? What is the breakdown on services? If the receipts speak to the services, then let's move on. But it's like you said, there's a lot of sensationalism that has been thrown, and I'm waiting for the next round of things that my good senator will throw at whoever is in his line of fire.
All right, whoever's in his line of fire. I like that. Okay, Mr. C, let's head into the premium times and talk about the PDP. I mean, Nigeria's supposed biggest opposition party, who's only seen these days to be in opposition to themselves. Now, the ousted National Secretary of the People's Democratic Party, that's Samuel Anya, will resume duty at the party's National Secretariat in Abuja on Monday in defiance of the court orders that have removed him from office. It just seems to be 1 week, one trouble in the PDP these days.
You're right. So Senator was removed by a judgment of the Court of Appeals sitting in Owerri. It was held that he was no longer the substantive National Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. Another individual whose name as the substantive National Secretary. Honestly, at least from a Nigerian perspective, Senator Anyanwu has had filed a notice of appeal. He's also filed notice of motion for stay of execution of the said judgment. Now, it is on the back of these two filed processes that Senator Anyanwu resumed in the office of National Secretary yesterday. Now, it's important to educate everyone listening to this show today. Mere filing of a notice of motion for self-execution is not the same thing as the grant of an order of self-execution, because the application can be refused, it can be rejected, and it definitely can be dismissed. So all he has done is file the processes. The application for stay of execution judgment has not been set on hearing. Arguments have definitely been taken, and a considered ruling or judgment has not been given in respect of that application. So what is the proper thing to do? The proper thing is that as it stands now, judgment of the Court of Appeal from Wari Division is binding on all parties. And until that judgment is set aside by the Supreme Court, it is the law in Nigeria. Therefore, he is impersonating the office of the National Secretary by being there. And I'm surprised the PDP couldn't throw it out, because that's the proper thing to do. The induction of the said order from the Court of Appeal, just get the piece in and have it arrested or have it removed forcibly from premises. But again, the PDP is a confused organization. And in Rivers State, the Congress, the ward local government state Congress that was conducted by a faction of the party, lawyer Ayokunmi, had everything thrown out by another court. So what is clear is that in the PDP, we have a bunch of individuals who have no respect for the court and its processes and are still inclined to doing things the way they want in a culture of impunity. And if this nation is going to move forward, we cannot continue to act with impunity. We can't afford to continue paying lip service to court processes, court orders, judgments. It has to.
Most definitely. Okay, Mr. C, really quickly before we leave this particular story, seeing as the PDP is, or well, used to be, I don't know about right now, supposed to be one of the big two when it comes to political parties in Nigeria, looking at everything going on, the internal wranglings and so on and so forth. Is there any way back for the PDP to mount any sort of challenge to the APC at the moment? Could that happen?
So, no, it's not going to happen, because the PDP is a disparate collection of strange bedrooms, just like BC. The only difference is that the BC is in office. That's all. The PDP are too many different souls, different agenda, different ambitions. There is no unity. And I challenge anyone, 10 PDP members at random, ask them what is the party about. You're not going to get coherent responses, 9 of them, minimum. Same thing with the APC. So for now, we truly don't have proper political parties that have national reach, national acclaim. We have a few grassroots parties that are trying to do it, but they haven't gotten to the point where they will be nationally recognized.
All right. Okay, let's leave that and head into the telecoms sector, Chibuzor. Let's head into the Guardian here. Now, this one really caught my attention. So it says, except there's any other intervention, indications emerged on Monday that the telecoms operators have concluded plans to suspend the unstructured supplementary service data. We know that as USSD over the non-compliance of the deposit money banks to the payment of the protracted 250 billion naira debts. Now, the suspension of the USSD service is expected in 2 weeks due to the failure of the banks to comply with the December 23, 2024 joint directive of the CBN and the Nigerian Communications Commission, which required them to make part payments of the debt by December 31, 2024. Now, if the USSD service is suspended, what does this mean for the average Nigerian out there? Because I will say that it has been a lifesaver for those times when you have you don't have data service or the bank apps are misbehaving. And a lot of Nigerians don't even have those sort of phones. Small phones like these SSD run of the mill. What does this mean going forward?
So this is small little background. I think
About 2019, I think this entire scheme started around 2019 when both the banks and the telcos disagreed on who was going to pay for the use of the USSD services. For obviously, I think everybody knows what they are. The strings that we send in star XXY ash and all that to our phones, which the banks had prior to 2019 had used to extend a lot of their banking services. So initially, it had been rolled out. The telcos had tried to roll them out as an additional service, and a lot of the banks jumped on it and used it to take off. Initially, using to sell airtime for the telcos. Then a lot of the banks now some of the banks now extended it to even their own individual services to extend their own service apart from just selling airtime, and that also became a cause of that became one of the things that became the argument. So at some point, telcos say, hey, you guys are using to make some money. Who's going to, and we have to pay to maintain this service and to grow this service, and who's going to pay for it? The banks pushed back, and if I recall, somewhere around then there was an initial study because the banks had claimed that it was a sunk cost, so they didn't need to pay anything for it. And I recall that there was some study commissioned by the CBN who did and found that that it wasn't some cost, there was some cost that was being incurred by the telcos to maintain that service. And at some point, this carried on till 2013. There was an initial disagreement of how much should be paid. Individual telcos came with how much they wanted to charge for the service. I think at some point the NCC came out and said, no, this is what we're going to, this is the agreed fee that they're going to have to pay for a unit of this service, and this was going to be paid. So when that was agreed, we're now left with an amount that was, I think, about 200 million or 200 billion that was agreed, and there was a question about who was going to pay for that, or how it was going to be paid off. And there's been a lot of back and forth. There've been, joint instructions by the CBN, who obviously regulate the banking sector, and the NCC will regulate telecoms, that this amount should be paid. I think it was somewhere around 2020. Yeah, there was some instruction that there should be a payment of that backlog of about, I think it's 200 billion as of 2023 that should have been paid off by the banks to the telcos. Now, a lot of the banks have resisted making those payments, and a lot of them have, chosen not to. There was a deadline, I think, that was set for December 2024 for these payments to be made, or the services will cut off. And I think
a part payment, according to
there was, it was basically let's see some traction on this. But a lot of the banks have not, because I remember even that back then, the questions were being asked, were the banks going to make those payments, and a lot of the banks are non-committal about making those payments. And telcos have said, you know what, the only way we can get our money back in this instance is to cut off the services. Because of both industries are heavily regulated, obviously telcos cannot proceed without the go-ahead by their regulator. The same should happen in the banking space, but the banks obviously seem to have built up some clout. It's either the banks have built up some clout of their own, or there's not enough pressure by the CBN for them to make those payments. So what we see is at the point where the telcos looks like the telcos have gotten some go-ahead by their regulator that you can go ahead and cut off this service from the banks at a particular point. Now, what are the options for the banks if this happens? The options for the banks would be to push things like their banking apps, which is dependent on data, which has to be provided by the same service providers.
Right.
And it's one of the questions that the telcos have had, even when the argument for increase of tariff or new tariffs have come, is that, how do we invest into improving services if you're owing us debt and we're not able to charge cost-reflective rates for our services? But you want us to go and invest so you can power more of your services. So basically, this entire concept of a dump pipe, that we're going to use the telcos as a dump pipe. They will provide the infrastructure, we'll just give services, and everybody will be happy. Telcos have to think how to expand to meet up the services and provide, services, but we don't care about that. That's not our problem. So that's where the banks are today. They don't want to have to. It appears that they don't want to have to pay that cost for those things, or they are pushing back on it. So how this happens at the end of the day, for me, it's pretty straightforward that at some point the CBN would have to make a bigger move to enforce this for the banks. Unless that happens, the only other ways are either negotiations, commercial movements. But at the end of the day, if CBN doesn't step in to enforce it with the banks, I don't see much traction happening with the banks, apart from the negotiations that are already happening and have been happening for a long time between the telcos and the banks.
Right, right, right. How much of an effect do you think this will have on the average Nigerian? Because, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't have these internet-enabled phones.
So once you remove those services, like you said, for people who don't have internet-enabled phones, people don't forget your average Nigerian is already battling with several things. So to access their funds, to do transactions, your average Nigerian is already having to go to intermediaries, your POS. In some instances, they're using the POS operators to go help them do transfers. This ones are earning some income around it because obviously the other option is maybe to walk into the banks, which either bank branches are not close enough to the customers, so they have to incur some costs, especially outside places like Lagos, or go to in other places that have gone to the ATM machines which don't exist or are not working in a lot of instances. So they're not going to intermediaries. So at the end of the day, the average Nigerian is going to incur additional costs, having to find a solution that he would have found. And don't forget that these USSD transactions are transactions that were originated by your average Nigerian who has been charged by the bank.
Right.
So it's not like it wasn't debited. There was a debit that happened. So it's something that at the end of what I see is that if the CBN comes and steps in, yes, it's good that some banks have made a move for it, but it will be good to see how this pans out in terms of getting the banks to finish up the payment and let's forge ahead with other things.
All right. Let me take a couple of messages this morning here. Z-Man from Bristol says, we know why Obasa was impeached. He dared to have the ambition of becoming the next governor of the state when he knows that the, in quotes, owner of Lagos' son is being prepped for the role. Second base, Jerry. Ajayi Olonilua says, the corrupt allegations against the impeached Speaker of Lagos House of Assembly, especially the alleged spending of a whopping 17 billion naira to erect a gate at the assembly, is quite heavy. Hence, there is no opposition to his impeachment. It's another proof that corruption is pervasive at every level of governance in the country. God help us. All right, Tony from Marine Beach says, the fact remains that almost every party member has a rub of palm oil on their hands. The day anyone decides to nurse his or her ambition against the opinion of the anointer, the oil on his hand will be used as a tool against him. I see this as Ambode version 2. God save democracy. Okay. Dia from Fagba says, like Adibantu sang in his song, loyalty for this government, na cash and carry, objection, na mortuary. Everybody gets agenda, and so on and so forth. You can see all this playing out with this government. Once you are outside of the line, they take you out. This is what happened to Ambode and now Obasa because he wants his son to run for governorship. He hasn't come out to say he wants his son to run for governorship. That's just been something that's been put out, been circled around. He hasn't come out to say he wants his son to run for governorship. Let's be circumspect. What's talking to us here? This is a message from Abayomi. It says, ruling party in Lagos operates differently from its structures across the nation. In Lagos, the GAC functions similarly to a board of trustees, wielding significant influence over party affairs. Obasa displayed little respect for the authority of the governor's office, despite multiple meetings being convened. He appeared to feel untouchable due to his perceived power. It's important to note that Ambody's bid for a second term was halted by the GAC and not Tinubu, as many narratives suggest. And Uluwashei says the people of Jam will be wondering why the very few millions they're trying to shave off the national budget is what the senator is focusing on and not on others shaving billions at a time. Shaving is shaving now. Uluwashei, what do you think about it? Anyways, we need to go call it the morning. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And thank you so very much, Mr. C, for making a great Tuesday morning. Always a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure this morning. Have a lovely day. Bye.
Mr. C.
Thank you for having me.
Oh.
Thank you for having me. And here's to a productive and rewarding day.
Amen to that. Do have yourself a great Tuesday. And once again, to you listening to us out there, thank you for keeping it tuned to Smooth 98.1. Don't go anywhere. We'll get into the grapevine at 8:15. Rebel is joining me to talk about entertainment and so much more.